Freezing public spending on a state level. They're cutting workers' benefits. Their salaries are being reduced. Unemployment is growing in Venezuela. Unemployment is decreasing, and that somehow the way that Venezuela is projected as though it's some kind of failing state, when in fact it's the exact opposite. And that it's a government that is investing more and more in the well-being of the people. That's actually the number one priority of the Chavez administration. It's not perfect. I mean, there are errors are made. It's a process and a government run by human beings. But overall, it's a model that's looking for a way to invest in and promote and develop human prosperity, and not just focus on economic development for a select group.
All right. What you did in the Chavez Code was to use documents that you managed to get from the government under the Freedom of Information Act, other ways. And you worked well with the documents to demonstrate a real pattern and practice by the United States government that really showed a major infiltration, illegal infiltration into the operations of the government that led to the kidnapping of the president. Now we've got WikiLeaks, and we're beginning to learn more. There are many that we haven't seen yet. But why don't you put that into context, what we know from WikiLeaks in the context of what we already know about what the United States would like to do in this hemisphere.
And most of the documents, at least that have come out so far in relation to Venezuela and Latin America, just confirm what we already know, and what, in the work that I've been doing, for example, has been demonstrated, which is this growing campaign to try to somehow contain the influence of Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution, and take active, hostile, aggressions towards Venezuela and others in the region. The documents that have come out, and I mean, what I like about the documents that WikiLeaks obtained, of course, is the fact that they're uncensored. So it's not the same as a lot of the documents I've gotten through FOIA. They're partially censored, and there's information that we're not seeing, whereas these are just the cold and brutal truth. But one of the problems is that the way that WikiLeaks has set up the making public the documents, unfortunately, has been very selective in terms of choosing which media have access to them. And to our disfortune or unfortune, to our dismay, WikiLeaks has chosen media outlets that are not in any way friendly to Venezuela. So the documents have been trickling out, but I'm still waiting. I know that there are over 4,000 documents that talk about Venezuela, and not even 10% of those have been released so far. And just in fact today, there are some that just came out talking about Venezuela. But overall, I mean, it's this ongoing campaign. There's one document in particular that sort of sums it all up, which was 2007 document from the U.S. Embassy in Chile, in Santiago. But the name of the document was Containment Plan for Hugo Chavez. And it was all about the U.S. government's efforts to try to convince regionally other governments, as well as internationally, European governments, to take a more aggressive stance towards Venezuela, try to isolate Chavez and break deals with Chavez, and also how to use media, how to use the different media outlets in Latin American countries to promote and exaggerate the myths about Chavez, and to exploit the negative aspects of his government, which is what we see in the media around the world. And so it just confirms that the U.S. government is behind that plan. And I mean, there are other documents. There's one really a good one for us in Venezuela from just last year, 2010, where the head of one of the major dailies, a private newspaper in Venezuela, El Nacional, met with the ambassador of the U.S. in Caracas and requested money to fund the newspaper, otherwise the newspaper would go under. And he said, if we don't get the money by April 2010, the newspaper, we're going to have to shut down operations. And of course, they're still operating. It's one of the major dailies that's most aggressive towards Chavez. And so now there's evidence that they're directly funded. Once again, the U.S. government is funding foreign media to promote its agenda. So these types of things are coming out in those documents, as well as the overall sort of dirty operations and the efforts to undermine governments and relations around the world. It's becoming evidence through the documents that WikiLeaks got.
We're speaking with Eva Golinger. She's the author of, among other things, the Chavez Code, an investigation into the U.S. internal involvement to destroy the government of Hugo Chavez.
Well, you just heard how the U.S. is funding the imperial media of the world. And that's why we depend on you to fund the anti-imperial media. There's not many of us around, really. You know, there's a few.
Society, the economics, the cultural part, the political, the social, and it's not just an uprising. I mean, I think there's a difference what's been happening in the Middle East, in certain countries like Egypt and Tunisia. Those so far have been uprisings. They haven't been transformations yet, because in fact we've seen in the case of Egypt the process that's initiated there a couple months ago has been co-opted by the same powers that were running things before, and of course the U.S. is heavily involved, right, trying to manipulate things to come out in their favor. Different incidents and events that took place throughout the latter part of the 20th century. And then when Chavez wins the presidency the first time in 1998, it was on a platform of revolution. And many people may not have fully understood that, but as things began to change, and it began with a new constitution that the people themselves drafted. And so they created first the new backbone, their structure of their country, and from that began to build. And so even though, it's a slow process because it's a democratic process, it's a human process, and it's an inclusive process. So it's not saying, hey, all you who don't like it, get out, or, trying somehow to just say this doesn't work, let's just get rid of it and do something else. They're actually trying to rebuild from within and transform. And it's we don't know in the end how things are going to turn out. I mean, it is an experiment. It is a revolution. But that's one of the things I most like about it, is that it's something that's naturally evolving from within, that the people are creating, and that it's taking into account all the different intricacies of the society and the differences, and allowing space for that and allowing time for that.
We hear so little about what's really going on in Venezuela, in the region. How would you help us understand better? What are the things that would be really surprises to people if there was serious reporting about what's going on? What don't we know about this?
There are so many things. I mean, to talk about some of the more positive changes that have been taking place. There's been a total transformation, of course, of all the healthcare and education sectors in Venezuela. There, thousands of new schools have been built. Satellite universities have been built.
How does the healthcare? How do you see that change?
Well, I mean, now we have a new healthcare system that is free universal healthcare at all advanced levels. So it's not just preventive based. And of course, we do have private healthcare as well. People can choose that if that's what they like. But you can also go to any of the clinics that have been built, diagnostic clinic. I mean, for example, if you get a backache, your back hurts. This happened to me, so my back was hurting a lot. I went to one of the free clinics that is part of a cooperation with Cuba. So it's a mix of Cuban and Venezuelan doctors, and instead of them just saying, oh, take some aspirin or giving you a shot of pain medicine, they actually do a thorough checking you, taking blood, and I even had an MRI done, for a backache, just to determine, do you have a hernia, to do, make sure that that we can figure out what's wrong with you, and that there's no charge. And there's and you don't have to be concerned, you yourself as the person, going through this experience, is this going to break my bank? Am I going to have difficulties because of this? Do I have to choose between having a back that hurts and my wallet? And that type of thing, even though it may sound, it shouldn't sound trivial, because people in the U.S. cannot fully understand that, but that changes the mentality of the people in the country when they get used to that. Now we have a new generation growing up in that kind of environment, right, where you don't have to be worried about if you get sick, what's going to happen. Do you have to pay insurance? Are you going to be asked? They don't even ask you for anything. Anyone can go. You can go. Down to Venezuela and receive health care. So, and on top of that, new clinics have been set up nationwide and in areas that never even had medical attention before, in poorer communities, where, even in some cases where the doctors go door to door to check on people and make sure they know that they have this option now. And then on a worker level, for example, in addition to benefits that have been